In the past, we have seen the rise and fall of many methods of transportation. The horse and buggy, the sailboat, the noble Oldsmobile. These archaic mechanisms to get from one place to another rarely tell a compelling story. The buggy was replaced by the car, steam power killed the sailboat, and God's wrath killed the Oldsmobile. One vehicle stood above the rest, and a single accident would end decades of prominence. Of course, this is the Zeppelin. Well, to be specific, the Rigid Airship. The name Zeppelin doesn't apply to all, but for simplicity's sake, I, and the rest of the world, use it as a universal term. This story begins with a man. Well, more specifically, a count. Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin. A military man from Germany, he found himself taking part in the Union Army of the American Civil War. It was here where he developed his taste for flight, as he helped a soldier scout an area with a balloon. Soon after he took part in a flight himself, he became fascinated with the topic of air travel. He attended a lecture of air travel a decade later, which became the catalyst that helped him design the first airship. After the course of several decades of research and work, Zeppelin amassed a small team and developed the very first rigid airship. Now, prior non-rigid airships existed. Those were called blimps, by the way. But rigid airships differed as the shape of the craft is built out of metal and covered in a fabric. Inside this, pockets of gas, either hydrogen or helium, allow the airship to float. Blimps have no internal frame, so the craft deflates and inflates. The size changes. The product of Zeppelin's effort was the LZ-1. Flying 3 times in total, and suffering damage on the first, the airship concept wasn't off to the best start. While truly original and new at the time, it failed to impress the German army, and the project was cancelled. Zeppelin had investors willing to see the project succeed, which would give rise to the LZ-2. This, after completed, would be immediately damaged before flight after an accident. When it did finally manage to take off, it crashed and was taken apart. Zeppelin persisted, and yet another model, the LZ-3, was made. This would be the success Zeppelin was waiting for, flying over 2 hours in its first flight. The German military was impressed and told him if he could make the airship fly for 24 hours at a time, they would be willing to purchase one. The LZ-3 wasn't even close to being capable of this, and with that, Zeppelin developed a new airship, the, you guessed it, LZ-4. This was Zeppelin's first real chance of proving the airship's worth. So improvements like more gas capacity were added so it could actually fly for 24 hours. When the project was finished, it was estimated to be capable of 31 hours of flight. The excitement for the new vehicle was booming at this time, and on August 4th, 1908, the LZ-4 had the chance to prove its worth. The ship flew over major German cities, attracting over 40,000 people. Constant technical issues left the ship in bad shape during the journey, and during a repair to the engine, the ship crashed into the trees and burst into flames. The reaction from the crowd was actually excitement and nationalistic joy over the vehicle. The public donated enough money to allow Zeppelin to continue his projects, resulting in the LZ-5, which crashed again. The business manager at Alfred's company, Alfred Colsman, would soon create what would become the Zeppelin's primary purpose: transportation. While the military never granted the contract to purchase airships, the public was still enamored with the new vehicle. Zeppelin himself hated the idea, as he was, first and foremost, a military man, and to this was seen as selling out. So Colsman would go on to create DALIG, which is an acronym which, when translated from German, translates to German Airship Travel Corporation, and would be exactly what it did. DALIG would commission Zeppelin to create airships for commercial use, and the first one to take passengers was the LZ-7 Deutschland. This would be destroyed during a thunderstorm while carrying journalists, resulting in, of course, it crashing. Surprisingly, nobody died, and nothing burst into flames. DALIG was in a bit of a poor situation, with the Deutschland being the one and only commercial airship. They had a non-commercial airship, the LZ-6, which was built back when the Zeppelin was still trying to get a military contract. It was altered to function as a passenger airship, and managed to go about a month before bursting into flames on the ground. Such beautiful machines. Surprisingly enough, the fragile industry of airship travel hadn't been dead yet, so another ship, the accurately named Deutschland 2, was made. Again, if you haven't seen the pattern, crashed before in flight after a strong gust of wind picked it up. It wouldn't be until the LZ-10, the Schwaben, that an actual viable ship survived long enough to justify itself. It lasted a year and carried over 1,500 passengers before bursting into flames, injuring about 30. From this point on, Delig had better luck, succeeding in iteration upon iteration to a point where about 1,500 flights were completed before the start of the Great War. The commercial aspects of airship travel took a hiatus at this point. Existing airships were often commissioned to the military to help for the war effort, and Delig was more or less obsolete for the next decade. As World War I began, different nations began to experiment with the airship, but Germany was still the only one using them prominently in battle. Zeppelins were still by and far the most popular, although other manufacturers did exist. As World War I began, the airship finally gained military support, and both the Navy and Army used them, but for different reasons. The Navy used them for scouting, especially over the North and Baltic Sea. This was actually how Zeppelins were used most in warfare, although it lacks the often romanticized bombing runs. Those were controlled by the Army, and while they inspired a great sense of fear to the Brits and awe to the Germans, in truth they were quite incompetent machines at war. So the Kaiser sent off the glorious Zeppelin off to bomb the Brits into oblivion. No historical buildings could be harmed, and London was off limits, at first. Any limitations of which buildings the airships could target weren't likely the utmost of the operators' concerns. The massive size of the ship made them a huge target to anti-aircraft fire, and the accuracy was so poor many bombs just dropped into the countryside. The higher the airship flew, the less accurate it was. But if it flew lower, a single biplane could take it out. Early on in the war, normal bullets weren't too effective. After all, just shooting the ship wouldn't cause it to combust. That's what the incendiary rounds were for. After the Brits started using those, bombing runs might have well been kamikaze missions. As you likely understand by this point, Zeppelins are fragile. They are either filled with hydrogen, a flammable gas, or helium, a non-flammable gas. While helium was the optimal choice, the limited supplies made hydrogen the only real option for the Germans, which meant that the incendiary rounds really were enough to kill a whole crew in seconds. During the war, 557 people were killed by airships, which may sound like a lot, until you consider 5,000 bombs were dropped. That means for every 10 bombs dropped, one person was killed. Not very effective. Many Germans lost their lives in the bombing runs, as Zeppelins were indeed awful weapons of war, and by the final year of the war, barely any attempts were even made with the airships. As Germany lost the war, the Treaty of Versailles banned the creation of new Zeppelins, even for commercial use. Airships that managed to survive were given to the Allies as reparations, and the days of the Zeppelin seem to have passed. The Zeppelin Company did create several airships for Allied nations after the war to stay alive, and by 1926, the restrictions of commercial Zeppelins had ended. This would begin what many consider the golden age of airships. By 1928, airships were offering flights across the Atlantic, before even airplanes. In fact, one of the best-known crafts, the Graf Zeppelin, managed to fly across the world. Airships were reaching 80 miles per hour, nearly 3 times as fast as the ships just a few decades prior. But, of course, just a few years later, the whole industry collapsed with the Hindenburg. Just a quick reiteration for those who don't know, the Hindenburg was a massive airship, dwarfing nearly all others, that was flying from Germany to New Jersey. When it reached its destination, it burst into flames, for still undetermined reasons. The death toll was around 36, and the horrific nature of the event, only furthered by the media coverage following, effectively killed the airship industry overnight. While other incidents obviously happened prior, the USS Akron's crash resulted in 73 deaths, this was on a commercial craft, and it had ended the public's fascination with the transportation method. Sadly, after this, not much happened in airship history. The surviving airships in Germany were scrapped for parts at the start of World War II, and while the Zeppelin company still makes airships, they aren't rigid like these were. Today's airships are almost exclusively blimps or semi-rigid, meaning they lack the full frame like the Hindenburg. To be honest, this isn't too sad. While the Zeppelin looks amazing, it really pales in comparison to the airplane in every respect. Just a quick look at its history shows that the Hindenburg wasn't just one tragedy to an era, the whole history was a tragedy. Zeppelins are basically giant metal balloons that can burst into flames for seemingly no reason. But I can't say I wouldn't ride one. This is Cody of Knowledge Hub.